Yours.
All righty, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from Tuesday, January the 19th. Does anyone have any comments first on the minutes? If not, then I'll take motions on the minutes.
We approve.
Do I have a second?
This is Doug. I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is public comment. Karen or Kelsey, did we get any public comment coming into City Hall?
We didn't get any public comment request.
Okay. All right, then we can move on to the action items, which is utility relief requests. The first one was for Shorewood Apartments, I guess they are, with a route breaking the pipes underground with a staff recommendation to approve.
So moved. This is Janae.
Thanks, Jenny. Second?
This is Doug. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I had a question on that one. Can
Go ahead.
somebody clarify the meeting or the meter readings? I couldn't understand them.
Meter reading?
Sure, I understand your question, Les.
Yeah, but the meter readings, you lost me somewhere. On page 3 or 4.
Let me look.
Where we go from 0 to 1 to 91 to...
Oh, I can speak to that, Les. That is when a meter gets replaced. It oftentimes gets reset by the guys. So that shows up weird on the actual printout of the meter reading information.
Okay.
So I assume maybe that was one of the ones that was replaced for with the meter module updates?
That was replaced with a new meter.
All right, thank you. Does that answer your question, Les?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next request, which is
We
Feldmeyer.
didn't take a vote. Did we
Did we
take a
take
vote?
We did take a vote.
Okay.
Did we miss you in the vote, Les?
Pardon?
Did we miss you when we did the vote?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Feldmeyer was a toilet supply line leak with a staff recommendation to approve.
So moved.
That was Janae. Do I have a second?
This is Doug. I'll second.
Thank you, Doug. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I had a question there again. Why wasn't the meter turned off? Nobody was in the house.
Or was the meter turned off?
And we had the same plumber. It took him a month to get there. Maybe we ought to check our plumbers to make sure that they're responding when they're called on.
Les, we've actually had
Plumbing.
several people apply for utility relief requests in the last couple months. We've had a very, very difficult time getting on plumber schedules. They're so busy right now that it's just been very difficult to get people to come out in a timely manner. And this is not the first utility relief request that we've seen that on.
So when the meter, when the leak is identified, are they, like on this case, did they identify it based on getting a notice on their bill? Do we know that?
Let me see here. Yes, it does look like they had a notice on their bill.
Okay.
I know when I had the water leak, I actually turned off my water most of the time and just turned it on until we got it fixed. And these are going on for a month or two, which seems like we're wasting a lot of water that we shouldn't be. Just a comment right now. And it seems to be the same plumbing company that's causing the delays.
Well, and sorry, go ahead, whoever was about to say something.
I think most of these are second homes, as you guys recognize, and Daryl's not allowed to turn the meter completely off. He can turn it down, which he, most of the time he does when he contacts folks and let them know that they're on the leak list, depending on what they instruct him to do or how fast they can get somebody out. Most of them have property management companies that take care of their properties. And so if they're handling it, Daryl doesn't adjust the meter. But if they're not in town and they don't have someone that's going to be able to get there right away, he typically turns the meter down way low. But if the resident is handling it and they have somebody coming over, then Daryl doesn't change the status of the meter in any way unless they request him to do so.
Well, I think we're going to run into this more often in that they're claiming that plumbing companies are the ones that are at fault, and this is the same plumbing company that it took 1 month to fix it in one case and overnight on the other case.
Yeah.
Seems strange to me.
I agree, Les. It would be great if they could get a plumber who could come out, in a more timely manner. But in the end of the day, that's the responsibility of the homeowner. And we certainly appreciate what Daryl's able to do in terms of turning the meters down when the homeowner can't get to it. But going beyond that, it doesn't sound like we as a city really have any recourse other than to just to remind them that the water is continuing to flow until they can get somebody to either come and turn it off at the house or to get their plumber to come and fix it.
Well, it's strange to me that M&F Plumbing took a month to get to this one, took overnight to get to the other one. Are the people telling us the right facts, or is the plumbing company only doing business with certain people? And if they are, then we ought to wonder about their license.
Yeah.
So Carolyn and team, once we've completed the meter module program, what I'll probably propose to the committee is that they consider modifying the ordinance associated with these leak requests. And because now that people can see, within an hour that they have a leak, they should be taking immediate action. And if they don't, and or the plumber can't show up and they're not taking immediate action, then our consideration of these leak requests should probably change. At this point, they don't have a way to monitor it unless they have one of the new units and they have an ion water account where they can monitor it. They're kind of at the mercy of either visually seeing that they have a leak, or Daryl calls them and lets them know when he gets the leak report every month. But once we have the new meter modules everywhere in town, then that would be the time for us to take a look at the ordinance and set a different set of expectations now that people can monitor it, like I say, within the hour of knowing they've got a leak. But for us to talk about that right now, when we don't have all residents, don't have the ability to know right away, and it's kind of a wasted conversation,
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I'm wondering whether really M&F has preferred customers or just what's happening there. It seems like if they're going to be licensed to work in the city, they should treat customers equally.
And Les, M&F, I can speak on this. M&F does treat each customer the same. Even when I call them for city issues, sometimes it takes a couple of weeks depending on their workload. They're very, very busy, and I've never seen them or heard of them treating a customer differently than another customer. So it's not even, yeah.
And this is Janae. As a contractor, I agree the same way. I mean, sometimes, we treat the emergencies as fast as we can, but we cannot always, do it. So.
Thank you, Janae. All right, so we'll move
Hey,
on.
this is Doug, just to make sure that Kelsey's records are correct. We had, on these first two requests, we had questions and discussions after the vote. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that these first two have been approved.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification, Doug. All right, next one, Christian Conference Center, who had a leak in the crawl space with a staff recommendation to approve. Any discussion on this one? Okay, how about a motion?
I'll move. This is Janae.
Thanks, Janae. Second? Anyone?
This is Doug. I'll second it.
Thank you, Doug. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the last one was Brown, and it was a water heater expansion tank with a staff recommendation to deny, and I'm going to need an explanation because I don't quite understand what this one means.
Yeah, so I'm not a plumber, but I'm going to explain this the best of my abilities. The expansion tank is actually a secondary kind of unit that sits up and to the side of the water heater. And so to the best of my understanding, that leak would be happening on the floor, so it would not go through the sewer system. However, you will notice that our utility relief request form does specify that the relief request must be filed within 60 days of the repair. And this one was well outside of that window. So that was my recommendation to deny, but of course you guys as the committee have every right to make whatever decision you would like to in this scenario.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. I kind of Googled the expansion tank and I was like, okay, does that really leak into the house? But I did not notice the dates on these. So thank you for clarifying that. So does somebody?
I move to approve staff recommendation.
Thank you, Janae.
I want to just talk about it just for a second before we move to that. This is Doug, and I do come from a background and culture where late is late and the rules are the rules. And this applicant obviously missed the 60 days. My only question would be, are we ever going to entertain one where there's mitigating circumstances? None was listed here. Let's say hypothetically they said I was in the hospital for 2 months. Would we have come to a different decision? I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but I think we need to think about that. Is this a totally inflexible rule? Silence. Huh?
In my mind, we ought to consider mitigating circumstances. We had one a couple months back where a person was in the hospital, and I thought they should be released, but I don't see mitigating circumstances here.
I agree with Les.
Doug, I agree with you that it should be mitigating circumstances should be considered. I agree with that point.
On this case, Amber, or just as a general?
As a general, sorry, yes, as a general thing. In this case, it doesn't seem like there are any. And so I would deny, for me, I would deny this one. But I agree with Doug about thinking about future considerations. Okay.
Janae, did you have a comment?
I'm fine with that too.
Okay, so we had a motion to approve the staff recommendation, which is to deny this particular request. Do I have a second on that?
Second, this Les.
Thank you, Les. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that takes us through the 4 utility requests. So we will move on to discussion and informational items. The first item is public works status. Karen.
Hey, I'll update you guys. I don't know how many of you had a chance to go in and listen to the recording of the discussion regarding utility rate increases and the projects that we have on the table. If everybody had a chance to look at that, I won't reiterate some of the things in that. If anybody did not, can you let me know that you were not able to see it?
This is Doug. I
Never
followed.
heard about it.
This is Doug. I followed the teacher's orders and I watched all 2+ hours of it.
Thank you, Doug.
Same with me. This is Amber.
Thanks, Amber.
I never got notice of it.
Okay, thanks you guys.
I think you guys did an excellent job during your presentation, so thank you for doing that.
I totally agree. Karen did a wonderful job presenting the whole picture from start to finish. And I think it really helped the counselors understand the bigger picture. Thank you, Karen.
And Caroline, you did an awesome job too, so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, I agree that the team, you guys helped me a lot be able to not only identify the best projects to take forward, but the ones that meet the most criteria within the loans that we could get money to help reduce the impact to the ratepayers if we made an adjustment to the utilities. I think that was the biggest message I was hoping would come through in the meeting. Is it wasn't so much about the individual projects as it was the fact that we're at a fork in the road.
This is Doug. Let me know. I did have a couple of outtakes from my watching that. One's a question and one's an observation, but I don't want to jump the agenda. So you just let me know when you want those feedbacks.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, you want them now? Okay.
Yeah.
First one is just kind of a technical question. I was watching on the computer and trying to follow the charts and everything, but my big takeaway is if we were to go out and secure the loans and the funding and the external sources and raise the rates as you outlined in the presentation, that 2028 was kind of a magical year, because at that point everything would basically be in place, and the debt service would be handled, and we'd kind of be on cruise control at that point. And hopefully I've got that right. But getting to 2028, between now and then, there would be a series of rate increases. And that's where I kind of got lost just a little bit. It looked like 4%, then 5%, then 8%, until you got to that 2028. Carolyn or Karen, can you let me know can you tell me what was the aggregate total increase between now and 2028 if we went that route? It looked like a series of percentages.
Ballpark, it was when you looked at the rate at the end of that 10-year period, it was basically double what we're paying right now. Does that sound like what you remember, Karen?
Not quite, but yes. I mean, I think, let me go back to Doug's first question or first comment on the cruise control aspect. I'm not sure we were in cruise control at any point. We haven't done a rate increase since our last one, but we did have projects teed up that we continued to move forward on by hook or crook. Some of that was grant money. Some of it was additional funding that we were given for those projects that enabled us to move forward without a rate increase. Didn't mean that we didn't need one or shouldn't have done one. We just had not. So the only way to go forward was outside source funding, which we did, and that's why those projects were able to be done. But now we're at a point where all those opportunities have been exhausted, and this is what was put on the table. So going back to your point about the overall increase, it was almost double what we're paying right now. But again, those things are happening in phases as a project is completed and you begin to have to pay that loan back versus just doing your drawdown during the project. You don't actually start paying back the loan until it's completed. So those different increments that you see on Lori's chart there is not only recognizing that, but it also recognizes that we pay interest during that period. So there's different things that hit during those periods that are causing that incremental percentage that you're seeing on her chart. It's just not as simple as getting a loan and paying it back. There's things that happen during that period. And you have more than one project going on. So one may become mature, the other one is still in the process. So all you're paying is interest. So it's complicated, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. It's a very complicated process. But the bottom line is, based on those particular projects or any projects they may put on the table that are of that dollar amount, this is what that would look like spread over that course of time to 2026, I think it was.
So if I'm a member of the public and I just want a bottom line, theoretically, if it all came together, the rates would double somewhere by the 2028 timeframe. Is that accurate?
Yes, and that's unless they were to exercise additional funding sources that council has not been open to considering and or has not pulled the trigger to consider. And that's the food and beverage tax,
Right.
some of the TLT money, the things that we talked about that night that are also funding sources that could make an additional impact to reducing what the ratepayers would pay. And that would capture some of the day tripper audience, which is what most people are concerned about. They feel that there should be a greater contribution by the day trippers versus the full-time homeowners.
Okay, that's excellent in terms of giving me the bottom line and how we get there. So at least my thoughts were.
Bruce
Go ahead,
had some
Karen.
comments too.
Doug, I just want to add something on there. Remember too, that model that Lori put together with a lot of help from Carolyn makes the assumptions work against the rates. In other words, we assume that 100% of the contingency will be spent. If it's not, we don't need as much money. And there were other things like that. So it was kind of built as a worst case scenario as opposed to a best case. The other thing is that we do go out to like 2028 and may go out a little bit further, but those are the projects that we've marked as the most critical and the ones that we will do first. And so my crystal ball doesn't say what we'll do after we do these other ones, but it is possible that there will be projects after 2028. And also, Carolyn and I talked after the meeting, there might be lines that need to be done, that would be smaller projects, but that we might add, in the middle of that time. So I don't know if we can say that, no, and this is it. I think we need to be flexible. And again, we're looking at the worst case when those projections were done.
Okay, thanks. The other thing is just a little bit of an observation that from watching the meeting is there is a, I'll call it just a mild tension, obviously, between the maintenance viewpoint and the new infrastructure viewpoint. And I've always been sort of a maintenance guy because over my career, I could see how maintenance was usually starved and the engineers like to go out and build, and there's ultimately a cost to pay for that. But on the other hand, in this particular case, I'm kind of pushed over a little bit to the new construction side, mainly because of all the excellent work that's been done by Karen and crew. You've got, it seems to me like my impression after the meeting was you've got all these opportunities teed up for funding, loans, grants, and I think it would not be, to go over and say, well, let's not do it because we don't want to starve maintenance. I think might be really short-sighted because of the scenarios that you've set up here. So I mean, if there's a way to walk and chew gum at the same time, great. But I just get the impression that there's a lot of irons in the fire. And Bruce, you mentioned that decisions need to be made pretty soon to take advantage of these opportunities. So that kind of pushes me back onto the other half of the new construction side, because this may be an opportunity that won't come around again, and it's based on a lot of hard work. So I'm kind of on that other side of the fence now.
If I can make a comment, with the projects that we're starting in phase 1 and 2, as far as, or we do 3, 2. Anyway, with the first, through 2028, those are replacement lines, with the exception of the main lines that are going to be running along 101. And if you think, I mean, I guess I totally agree on the maintenance side. And I think that it'll be possible when we're going with these loans that, if we identify an area that needs to be replaced, that, we could do $100,000-$200,000 project in there someplace if it had to be done. We just don't have those, necessarily identified right now. And we've got the other situation with the funding being possible now. The other thing is that when I look at the system, what was the name of that street that we did that's off of Sunset?
Poplar.
When we did Poplar, that Poplar maybe carries 0.5% of all the water in the city. But when you look at the lines that are coming down from the springs, they carry 100%. And I don't know what percent it'll be if we were to put the main in, especially to the north. But if we were to put that in and then going south, just doing the simple arithmetic, that would be 50% of the water would be able to be carried on that. And so that just gives us, if a line breaks in the city and we've got those lines with the valves that we're installing, we can isolate a small area and still provide water. But a lot of times the water lines that we have running through the city are the mains. That's how the water gets to, further down. So I think that we're trying to prioritize, where we can, what kind of work can we do that's going to impact everybody, and then kind of work our way backwards on it. But I think that it is going to be possible to add some line work if we identify it. But anyway, that's all I got to say.
And one thing I keep reminding everybody about, this loan process that we're going through that is about an 8 to 9 month process. These are competitive loans. So we're competing against towns like Salem, Portland, Hillsborough, and just what Bruce said is what pushes us up on the list of importance or what they consider critical versus some of the other larger populated cities. And that is that the work that we're doing is supporting a major aspect of our infrastructure that it impacts the majority of our residents. So a neighborhood project would not rank as critical as a route that gives us our drinking water to the entire town. And so this is why we've gotten so far in the process, because they consider these major infrastructure projects.
What was that call you and I were on?
That was one with the Business Oregon's board.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that?
So Bruce and I had to go on a Zoom call with Business Oregon and the board of directors that control this money, and they disseminate it out to the states. And we went on the first of 2 calls where we had to vet our projects, basically pitch our projects to this board. And we weren't the only city. There was a lineup of 5 or 6 cities behind us that were scheduled on this call. And they were doing the same thing we were doing. And when we got on the call and we pitched our project, there were 2 groups of people that were on there. They each controlled certain pots of money, if you will, that come from the feds to the state of Oregon through the governor's team. These people work under the governor. And when we pitched our project, they got very excited because it hit, 5 to 7 pulse points, if you will, on the critical factor. So in other words, we were not only addressing lines that get water to our community, but it was aged infrastructure. It was also addressing the seismic aspect that they made mandatory in our master plans that were just approved, and so on and so forth. It was under a certain dollar amount. It qualified us for a 50% principal forgiveness at the 1% 30-year loan factor. So it was all these pulse points that this particular phase of the project hit. They got so amped up about this that several of the board members said, this is the exact projects that we want to fund with this federal money. They turned to the other two members that were on the board call and said, would this also qualify for your pot of $3 million? Would you allow them to tap into that as well? And they said yes. When we got off that call, they were ready for us to go to the next stage right away so that they could release funds to us. And I said, we got to go to council first and present this to make sure that this is what they want to move forward on. And the only other thing they asked for is in our application process that shows how we're going to pay this money back, it had to include a rate increase. So they asked us on the call, do you plan on doing a rate increase of any type to be able to pay this back? And I said, that will be part of the council discussion. And so this is the kind of stuff that keeps us high up on the list of qualifying for this money. And right now we kind of have that money on a hook. But like we told the council, I've got to get back with them and tell them that we are going to move forward on this. Otherwise, that money goes to one of these other communities that's waiting for the funds.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Karen. I know how it works. That the feds send down the funds, and in almost every program, they're looking for execution and expenditure.
Yeah.
And if the locals aren't executing and expending, they pull it back. So,
our Business Oregon contact told me after that call that they're getting hammered by the feds because they don't feel that they're getting the money out and the projects are being executed fast enough.
Right.
And I said, well, part of it is just the laborious process you have to go through just getting there. I mean, to take 8 months to go through this process is just insane. And so they understand it, and they're trying to do everything they can to help us move the projects forward. So when we kind of fall back 5 or 6 steps and we start re-debating which projects, it's detrimental to this process.
Yeah.
Because if you start changing it, then what I have to do is go back and redo all my paperwork to re-establish what project we're doing. I basically start over again.
Yeah,
it's enough to make you want to pull your hair out. You know?
And I could see that at the meeting, and I think it was pretty much adequately conveyed. But I think the ultimate point there is just what you said: is this is teed up, and the ball. It's time. The ball's sitting on the tee, ready to be hit.
Yeah.
And all you're looking for, or what's needed, is this final reassurance of rate increases, so that the flow can start. So I could see what was going on there, especially in terms of trying to get affirmative council buy-in so you can assure the funding sources that's happening. So I understand that, and I appreciate all your hard work in getting it teed up. I know that's not easy.
Well, and I appreciate everything you guys have done that has helped us get to this point, because your input and your passion during the discussion was never taken as criticism or pushback. It's a hard process getting down to the point where we actually have projects we can put on the table and start filling out all this paperwork. So I appreciate all the guidance and the input that you guys have given me along the way, but I'm with you, Doug. It's kind of time to execute, and if we don't move forward on this, like I say, no matter what project we put on the table, we're going to have to do a rate increase. We're at that point. So it's really not about the project as much as it is the fact that we have that decision to make. And I think the council is there,
Okay, well, thank you. That's all I really had, or that's the total of what I had watching those 2 hours. But it was interesting and insightful. So thank you again.
Thanks,
Okay,
Doug.
And like Bruce said, I just will point out one thing is that if some of these factors come in, less than the worst case scenario that's put on the table, we will be able to do some of the neighborhood routes. A good example is we're doing Pacific and Gogana, where we had the water break last year. We're going to replace that stick of pipe. The budget committee gave us the funds to do that. But that will be exactly what I continue to strive for with our neighborhood routes. It's not like those maintenance projects are just going to get put on the back burner and ignored. I'm going to continue to try to find ways to chase that opportunity, whether it's within our own operations funds by underrunning some other project and requesting that I use those funds to do those maintenance projects, or that I chase additional grant funding that may come available to us. So I'm always out there looking for funding sources. And so it's not like those projects are never going to get done. And like Bruce has encouraged me to do in the past is have projects that are shovel ready, that I've done engineering on, and that I'm ready to pull the trigger as those funding sources come available. That's something that Les encouraged us to do when I first got in the director's chair, and I have followed that philosophy from day one. So as I present the budget this year to the budget committee, there's several projects that I'm asking for engineering dollars for to do exactly that. So I just want to give everybody my commitment and the reassurance that those neighborhood lines will not be ignored. And the maintenance will be considered just as important as the other routes.
Very good.
I'd like to make,
This is Jenny. Karen,
go
I
ahead,
just want
Jenny.
to say thank you. I know myself that that's what you always do. So I just want to make sure that we all understand that that's what you're doing. So thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Janae.
I
I
want to
got a
make one.
comment.
Les?
Yeah, in my 50 years, I've gone through quite a few of stimulus packages and such. And with the new Biden administration, we are going to be entering an entirely different mode of funding, in that he's looking at infrastructure programs that can be started right away. A very broad program that's outside of what you have to worry about for funding on rate increases or anything. Your idea of the shovel-ready projects is right on target, but that's sewer, water, utilities, roads, the whole thing. And we need to watch what the Biden program is so that we're ready to respond and have the project ready to go, and don't worry about raising rates in order to be there. It's a different ball game in this next 4 years. And I've seen this in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where stimulus comes out for the cities that are ready to go. And we've got a lot of projects on road work, too, that could be included in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You're absolutely right, Les. And what we saw, or what I saw in after the Great Recession, they were looking to fund 100% if you had a shovel-ready project. And if you didn't have one, they would make one up for you. They just wanted to get people working. So that's, and thank you for your support on that. I do want to make one clarification. It's something that became clarified for me recently. When we talk about the 50% loan forgiveness or principal forgiveness on at least one program, that 50% is limited to $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do a $3 million project, we might not get $1.5 million, but we're pretty good to get $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And we will chase all of those.
Yep.
So, but I misunderstood that, because we had several smaller projects that we started out with, and each time we got half. And when we asked the question, does that always work? No, it's only up to $500,000.
Yep.
But those are the ones that we're looking for.
Bruce, you also got projects that can be done in phases, too.
Yep.
And we ought to look at how we break it up so that we fit their criteria.
Yep, absolutely. And if you notice, that's kind of what we did with the phases. And and I think it was a little bit easier with wastewater because those were smaller, and actually they're a different funding source. So.
Well, the other one is roads that they're going to be interested in. So we ought to be thinking more than just water, wastewater.
Yeah, we're looking at the whole public works needs, and that includes roads, parks, and even recycle if we have projects. And we pretty much took care of recycle last year with the assets that we needed to address there. But you're right, the Business Oregon community where these loans are, the federal money comes into, that's pretty much water and wastewater, but that's not the only team of people that I'm working with to get infrastructure dollars.
The Biden program that I see that they're talking about is much broader than water, wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we ought to broaden our outlook and watch for all projects at this time, including even evacuation trails, such that can qualify for infrastructure type programs.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else have any comments on this topic? All right. Once again, Karen, thank you for all your hard work on this and all of your team working on all of those loan documents and trying to find all of that money out there for, to help our community out in getting these improvements and maintenance done. So with that, let's move on to the next topic, which is the water capacity study follow-up.
So Carolyn, let me just touch on something before you move to the water capacity. You had asked me about the hydrants in town and where we were with those projects. We have installed all hydrants that have been identified as needs in the master plan, with the exception of 2 locations that will be coordinated when we do the water line replacement project. And I can't remember. I think I sent this map out to you guys. If I didn't, I'll send it out after this meeting. But the 2 locations that we're going to be focusing on where we could use a couple extra hydrants is from Hemlock, Ocean, about mid-block. So the oceanfront properties between the Ocean and Hemlock down at the very south side of town. We have a lot of oceanfront houses there, and we don't have any hydrants that are mid-block that the fire department could hook into and fight a fire on some of those oceanfront houses. That's one area of the map that I've circled. The other one is Haystack Heights up on East Chinook, and then Coho. We have 1 hydrant at each of those locations. And again, that will be done. We have to upsize those lines before we can add the hydrants. So we're not at a point where we can even put them in until we get that done. And I'll send this map out. Other than that, we have excellent coverage throughout the city. And I printed a map out that shows where all the hydrants are. Talked to Daniel, and he agreed that those 2 locations are the only 2 remaining. And he said, outside of that, we have ample coverage, and our current fire chief agrees with that position. So that's where we are with fire hydrants.
And Karen, the reason I asked on that one is when, after the meeting, I figured you were going to be updating the master plan status matrix update. And there are 2 projects on there related to hydrants. And I just wanted to make sure, again, to show the progress that the city has been making on those master plan projects, to show the % completion on I think it's project 15 that speaks to the hydrants that are on lines that are 6 inches and larger. And I'm assuming those are the ones that you were just referencing.
Okay.
Yeah. So before we get that posted to the website, that matrix, which is kind of later on our agenda, if we can fill out that particular line too, again, just making sure that we're conveying to the community all of the work that has already been done on those master plan projects.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, it'd be great to
Carolyn,
see that. Yes, Les?
It's Les. Before we leave Public Works, next month, could we get a road improvement budget report? I don't know what we're spending for paving or road improvements this coming year. And there's a lot of bad streets around that need to be repaired and work done. I don't know what's in the budget for that. Could we have a report on that next month?
We have a spreadsheet that we keep the condition of all the streets. Carolyn did an audit for us, I believe, last year or maybe 18 months ago. And we status that whenever we do any asphalt repairs and so on. But the last budget year, we were not given any money for paving. And all that was asked to be put on hold based on the condition of the budget. So I will request some asphalt dollars this year to make repairs. I don't know if I will get them or not, but that's also money that I can pursue through federal funding. They haven't announced any funds available as of yet, but we expect those funds to come out and be available. So if I don't get them, then I will ask the budget committee to help support our asphalt maintenance. But if I do get it, then I won't have to ask the budget committee. So that's pending.
So do you have a prioritized list at this point, or are you not at the point where you've kind of gone through the list of the needs?
I can send you out the list that we've maintained for years, and it's the same one we've always used. That's the one you used when you audited the conditions of the roads, and I can send it out to the committee.
Right, but at some point you typically, extract out the ones that your team feels are the ones that need to go next. And we as the committee would typically see that at some point. And I guess I'm just asking, are you ready to take that step, or is that still a month or two down the line?
Yeah, right now, we're not even to that point in the budget yet. And so I have not identified anything firm, but I would like your input. So I'll get that out right after this committee meeting. And if you guys have specific streets off the top of your head that you're concerned about, I'd love the input now. Like I say, we're not to that point, but I know a couple streets that we'll probably focus on would be a Laurel between First and Second is in terrible condition. It's one I get a lot of complaints about, but that's not just asphalt. We have to do a storm line repair in there. So it's going to take a lot more than just asphalt money. It's going to be a storm line that has to be done. It's going to be expensive.
Okay. So Les, it sounded like you might have some ideas off the top of your head. So after Karen sends out that that list, if you can make sure that you send to her the ones that you have in your head, that way that should help her out when she gets to that point.
The spreadsheet that I send you is it'll show you the condition of the roads, and so it's a difficult spreadsheet to kind of understand. So feel free to call me if you look at it and you say, what the heck is this telling me? But it basically goes from one end of the block to the next end of the block. And it says if it's gravel, asphalt, and if it's asphalt, what kind of condition is it in? Terrible, medium, or pretty good condition, recently repaved, so on and so forth. And so the streets that you have off the top of your head, you can look for those on that spreadsheet and see what they're ranked. And we just pull from the worst condition streets and select however many streets that the budget will support. And again, it's not just the asphalt. Before we pave something, we have to consider what's underneath it. And if there's some work that needs to be done before we just put a new layer of asphalt on it and then turn around and have to cut it the next year. So there's a lot of considerations, and that's why your input is good. We can explain to you what comes along with asphalting those streets.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Is any other comments on this topic? We ready to move on? The water capacity study follow-up, and in the packet was the compiled responses I got, which were my responses. I guess everyone else was happy with what was in there to address the question that the report was intended was, is there enough water for a bit of an expansion of the community. And when I read it, I found a few other things that were, what's the right word? I don't want to say not complete, but they were kind of questions that I had that maybe were outside of the scope of the document itself, but I wanted to send those comments on to Karen so that staff has them and is able to do something with them at some point if it ever comes to the point where any of those questions need to be addressed. That was a long way around to the end, but I just wanted to make sure that those comments were on the record.
I had a comment on, and I thought you did a good job. This is the last person. I thought you did a good job on your observations. There is an important part that we should keep in mind is that our water treatment plant that we have there is set up so that it was there for peaking, but it primarily provides just an excellent source of water if the springs fail for any reason, and springs have failed in earthquakes and such, and the Ecola Creek is a good source, and the water treatment plant and such that we have there can provide water equal quality with their filtration systems they have, but it is for emergencies in addition to a peaking one. So we shouldn't lose sight that Ecola Creek is an emergency source of water for us, and we don't have to worry about desalinization or anything downstream of the water treatment plant. We already have it.
Thank you, Les. Anyone else? All right, so we can move on. Utility project and rate discussion. I think we've had that already. Is that correct?
I believe so.
I believe so too. So the last item is the master plan status matrix update. And if you'll recall, back in November, we kind of introduced the topic of having that top level status matrix posted out on the website so that the community members could see the progress that are being made on all of these capital projects, and to do it in a way that was not a large burden to staff to do it. So I think we started with the one that was generated in November, and then Karen has added some updates based on the current work that she's doing and inquiring or seeking grant funding and the current status of projects that are in work. And Karen, if I'm not mistaken, the intent is to get that spreadsheet, when updated, posted onto the web under the current projects.
Yep, so we're going to be updating that. That will be the tool we use. Kelsey's working to find a spot on the website where we're going to put that. So it'll be up there for folks to see. We will continue to have the column that shows what page those projects are on in the master plan, so that just the average Joe Blow citizen could go back to our master plan and take a look at those projects and see what the details are behind them. And then look at the website for the current status. So we'll be doing that on a regular basis, and Kelsey and Trevor and I will be managing that.
Does anyone have any questions for Karen?
I have a comment, but not a question. Carolyn, I just want to thank you for sharing about this spreadsheet and about this kind of status update. I just was thinking about how important keeping the community involved, because I think that it's really easy for people to forget about public works and our water system and our wastewater system, and especially in light of trying to solicit funding and to understand how many projects are currently underway and how many projects are yet to be done. It would really be a great kind of, if you will, fundraising mechanism, without like a subversive fundraising mechanism, to understand like, wow, there's a lot of projects that we have to do, and there are a lot that are underway, and it requires funding. And so I think that that could be an additional support to the initiatives that you want to get underway in the Public Works Committee. And so I really support that getting on the website, kind of sooner rather than later to assist with the city council just thinking about this stuff. I think it's really important.
Thank you, Amber.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Sweet. The next item on the agenda is good of the order. Does anyone have anything for good of the order? Doug?
I do.
Les? All right. Shoot, Les.
Go ahead, Doug. I'll follow.
No, I don't. At
Okay.
some point, way down the line, probably I want to talk about the leak relief in relation to ion water and you know, the certain forgivenesses that we've talked about in terms of changing our policy. That's not really even necessarily good of the order. It's just a placekeeper I want to keep there for a future agenda item. But that's it.
All right.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to start having that discussion because the project will wrap up in June.
Yeah.
And so it would be a good time to talk about what modifications that we want to make. And then that will obviously have to go in front of council, and you know how busy their agenda gets. So
Okay.
we could find ourselves, you know, in the fall before we would ever see any change of the ordinance, unless we kind of get in front of it now and we're ready to tee that up.
Okay. Glad I brought it up then.
Well, let's go ahead and put that on the agenda for next month. Kelsey, if you can add that.
That's it for me.
Thanks, Doug. Les?
Yeah. Question again, have we had vaccines for the wastewater staff and any of the contractors that are working in the wastewater?
Right now, none of our employees, with the exception of 2 that had exposure because they're on the fire department, that have received vaccines. None of the rest of us are in a category that qualifies us to get them right now. And so Rick is working on any coordination associated with vaccines for us. And so I'm not doing anything above and beyond that.
We are
Thank you.
following that. We're following that closely.
Thank you. Do you have anything else left?
Are the city staff and the council vaccinated?
No, we're not in the category that allows us to get vaccinations.
Bruce, this people working in wastewater right now, they are in direct contact with the virus. And if nobody's doing it, Cannon Beach has always been the leader in doing progressive areas and really protection of our wastewater employees and our contractors that are cleaning out the restrooms and such should be protected. And we ought to be lobbying more for that.
Les, I contacted DEQ and asked them for some guidance on that since they established the vaccines that are required for our wastewater workers and how frequently these vaccines are mandated, if you will. And until they're done with their beta tests that they have going on right now with the university, they don't have input for us on it yet. Until they get some of the results of some of that testing, they don't have a recommended path in that regard. And they're literally going by whatever the health department and the federal government is dictating. DEQ doesn't have any solid information that would cause them to dictate anything differently to us at this point. But he said he would keep all the municipalities updated as they get information.
Thank you for checking on that, Karen. I appreciate it. Anyone else for something for good of the order?
Yeah, I had one more. I still want to, and Bruce too, we need to do the convirus testing at our wastewater facility. And there should be grant funds available. If Astoria can do it, we ought to be able to do it at Cannon Beach. We've always been a leader. And in order to determine whether we're ready to open up our city, we ought to know that in the wastewater, we're not finding any virus in there. We can also find out whether there's different types of virus in there. So I think we ought to be pursuing that and looking for ways that we can start testing for the virus in our wastewater, just like we do for disinfections or any other thing.
Les, we did look into that. We do not have the equipment to even be able to do the testing at this point. We do not have access to any grant money associated with enabling us to do that. There's been no grant money offered to any of the municipalities that would allow them to buy the equipment that's necessary and get the training to do the testing. The testing that's being done right now with Astoria being involved is through the university, DEQ, and there were some municipalities that were selected to be involved of that beta test, if you will. And not all municipalities were invited. So again, until the results of that effort is known, there has been no further direction given to us. And we are not in a position to just go out and arbitrarily start this process without the proper equipment, the proper training to be able to do it. And there is no funding that has been offered that would allow us to do that.
Thank you, Karen. Have you had any contact with the folks up in Astoria just to keep apprised of what they're doing or what they're finding, just for informational purposes?
It has come up on the city manager calls. Outside of that, we're not getting any direct information. All of their efforts are steered through the university and DEQ, and they control the dissemination of any efforts that are coming out of that testing. We're not getting any formal communication on any kind of status as of yet.
But
Okay.
I have one of those calls this afternoon, so
All right.
I'll
Thank
find
you.
out and get the information out.
Well,
Okay.
let's remember that this is actually being used nationwide. It's not just Oregon State, but on the East Coast in New York, they're actually testing the individual nursing homes to find out where the virus is there. And it's something that we ought to be looking. I know there's not funds available now, but we ought to be continuing efforts to find those funds. It's not that big a deal, but if we can save a life or not have somebody contaminated, but also when we get to the point where we want to say, City of Cannon Beach, we're open to do business, we need to know whether our wastewater system has virus in it or not.
Thank you for your input, Les. And I guess Karen and Bruce will stay apprised of the situation and how it develops, and we'll take the appropriate actions when there are actions to be taken. Anyone else? Nope. All right. I guess that brings us to the adjournment. Thank you all for attending today and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See everybody next month.